next year, we'll be restructuring our whole network to pull our service out of downtown and redeploy it to provide a higher frequency and more comprehensive network here within the county.
This is Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort. Good to be with you on another edition of the world's leading transit executive podcast, Transit Unplugged. In depth this week with the CEO of Community Transit in the state of Washington in the United States. Rick Ilgenfritz, thank you so much for being with us today as a guest on our podcast.
It is great to be here, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. It was, you've got a lot going on there in your operation. I know a pretty big size operation. And so we're happy you could take a little bit of time today to share with us some about your system, the ideas you're working on, the projects you've got going on, and what the future looks like for community transit there. First off, tell us a little bit about your system, Rick. Give us kind of a scope of what you do there, the type of services, how big it is, number of vehicles, drivers. Give us the inside baseball talk.
Sure. Well, Community Transit is a great organization because we have a little bit of everything. We have a really unique service territory, 1,300 square miles in Snohomish County, Washington, which is the county just north of Seattle. So we have the North Corridor suburbs as you go up the Interstate 5 corridor out of Seattle. We have some compact, dense urban markets. We have some long distance rural services out toward the mountains and out toward the sound. We have a lot of commuter express services in and out of Seattle. So it's really an interesting mix of services. And at the core of it, we have an active bus rapid transit capital program and 2 operating BRT lines today. So it's fun. We augment that service, of course, with paratransit, with some contracted service on the commuter side. And we are experimenting as we speak with some demand response services.
So, Rick, Community Transit, what's the jurisdiction that it serves?
Snohomish County and the cities within Snohomish County. Our service territory is referred to as a public transit benefit area under Washington law. And we were voted into existence by a vote of the citizens of Snohomish County in the mid-'70s. So we have a number of small, medium, and large suburban cities north of Seattle and around the city of Everitt in Snohomish County.
Okay. And what's the population?
Our population of our service territory is about 650,000 people.
Okay.
And we are an independent public benefit authority.
Aha. So how does that work? Do you have a board of directors that are appointed by local political jurisdictions?
We do. We have a federated board of 9 members and 1 non-voting union representative. Our board members include representatives of the Snohomish County Council and a number of cities within the county, including City of Linwood, City of Marysville, City of Mukilteo, Arlington, Snohomish, and so forth.
And you were describing the type of services you have. Can you give us a little bit about, how many vehicles, passenger counts, those kind of things?
Sure. We operate our directly operated service uses a fleet of 305 diesel coaches. We have some hybrids. We have a blend of 40-footers and 60-foot articulated coaches. For our commuter services, we have another 60 or so coaches, and those are a combination of Alexander Dennis double-deckers.
Yeah. I've seen those. I think they have those in Vegas.
Right. And they ply the I-5 corridor back and forth between Seattle and Snohomish County. And then we also have some additional Arctics on that corridor as well.
So that's your commuter service into Seattle?
Mm-hmm.
And is that directly operated by you?
We contract for the commuter service.
That's what. Yeah, a lot of people do that. I did the same thing when I was at MTA Baltimore. We had 350 motor coaches contracted out to 7 different motor coach companies. It's their bread and butter. Unfortunately, They took a real hit during the pandemic. In the spring now of 2023, where are you at on that service, on the bus service, commuter buses?
So we provide 2 brands of commuter service. One is a Community Transit branded service that serves the Northgate rail terminal for Sound Transit, and also some point-to-point service to downtown. We also are the contract operator for the Sound Transit Express service. That is a Sound Transit branded product, and that operates the length of the corridor from Everitt to into Seattle and back. Those are both peak hour services that we run south in the morning and north in the afternoon.
Okay.
Now, the Sound Transit product runs all day, although at lower frequencies off peak.
And I hate to even ask this question because I'm trying to get away from it, but where are you at on ridership versus pre-pandemic levels on your commuter bus service?
Of course, that's a great question. I'll give you the longer answer.
Okay.
We dropped about 2/3 of our service at the beginning of the pandemic, 2/3 of our ridership, sorry. We are now back to about 65% of where we were. The commuter service is still struggling. It's come back up about, it bottomed out about 15%.
Yes.
Levels, and it's probably grown back about 20%.
Okay.
But it's, we're seeing a reflection of a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday commute week in that service.
Yeah, the 3-day city, man. We talk about that almost every week.
Right. And by contrast, our bus rapid transit service, which is branded Swift, BRT, that's 10-minute service, and it's almost all the way back to pre-pandemic level.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I think frequency is so important.
Yeah.
If there's a service there people know about and can rely on, they're going to use it. And we're seeing that in the BRT service.
Your neighbor to the north, Kevin Quinn, who runs TransLink in Vancouver, Canada, used to be my director of planning when I was at MTA Baltimore, and then he became CEO after I left. But he has a great quote, which I know other people say too, but I like to attribute it to him, and that is frequency equals freedom. And I think you're living proof of that there with your BRT.
Yeah. And interestingly, in addition to that, our weekend service has grown beyond pre-pandemic levels. Our rural services have grown beyond pre-pandemic levels.
Wow, that's great.
People are using the services differently than
Yeah.
they did before the pandemic. And I think it's because the rhythm of the work week has changed.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. I haven't really had a chance to talk to a CEO lately that runs a commuter bus service. Talk to a lot of commuter train service folks. So are you running the same level of service as you did pre-pandemic on commuter buses, like the headways in the morning and the afternoon? Are they the same, or have you reduced? Are you still, at a reduced level?
Yeah, we're at about 80% of what we were in 2019. So it's still pretty frequent service. And but yeah,
you're trying to match the ridership, right? Where you have the ridership?
Right. We want to have enough capacity out there on the road to meet demand. And one of our big markets is the University of Washington.
Okay.
That's a large research institution with 45,000 students. And when they resumed in-person classes last fall, that market picked up, and we saw ridership as a result of that. So the university, a big university, as you know, has its own gravitational pull when it comes to mobility, and we're seeing some response to that.
Tell me about your paratransit service. How is that doing? How does that run, et cetera? To me, and I think you would agree, Rick, the people that need service the most, need to have really top-notch service for them. I've spent a lot of my career working in the disability community, and I'm always concerned that, because the costs are so high to operate that curb to curb, and many cities are doing door to door service, that is an obvious choice when we hit that fiscal cliff, even though it is a civil right. And so I'm always interested to see how cities are handling that.
Well, it's interesting. You're well aware of the effects of the labor market on transit in general.
Yes.
And we've seen that in paratransit service here in particular. We contract for that service through TransDev. We've maintained that service throughout the pandemic. We did see a decrease, like everybody else, in patronage and utilization, but it has started to come back up. And our contractor does a great job, but they struggle with recruitment and retention, just like every other agency. So, the good news there is we're pretty well resourced. We're sales tax dependent. And aside from, April and May of 2020, the sales tax really rebounded and has performed super robustly ever since. So we've had the ability to respond on the resource side to make sure we keep that service available and on the road and there when people need it. But as with all of our services, it's an everyday push to recruit and retain personnel.
Yeah. I've asked a lot of people about that question. In Baltimore, my old hometown, the head of paratransit, Josh there, has switched to a brand new reimbursement methodology for the contractors that I've never seen before anywhere else in the country. I went and had lunch with him a couple months ago. I wanted to dig into it with him to see how it was working. Get this, instead of reimbursing the contractors like Transdev or MV, those companies like that, Keolis, National Express, RETP Dev, instead of per revenue hour, which is how most people do it, he's changed the reimbursement methodology to per full-time employee that they provide. So they've pulled out all the stops to bring in all their recruiters and make sure that all the slots are filled, because it's the old saying, follow the money. And so if that's how they're reimbursed, that it just the nature reports a vacuum or whatever you want to call it. And they have fully staffed. And you know what his on-time performance now is? 96% on-time performance. Now, as you know, you pull that one way and then productivity may suffer. But they have made a decision at the MTA in Baltimore, as I understand it, that they're going to focus on the customer. And they do have the resources, as you mentioned, you do, to cover those costs. And so they're going to focus on, we need drivers so that we can make sure that we don't leave anyone behind and that we improve our on-time performance. And they've done it. Tell me about your budget, Rick. You mentioned many people may not realize it, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a compatriot of yours on the show who I've already interviewed prior to interviewing you, Tom Hinkson, who's head of Everitt Transit. And he was telling me how that they have a sales tax, but it's less than percentage-wise what you get in the overall county, Snohomish County. So tell me about your funding, your budget, and how all that works.
Sure. So we're funded by a sales tax that is 1.2 cents on the dollar. And that's our primary revenue source.
Okay.
Only local tax source. And it produces a robust level of income every year. Our operating budget for 2023 is $200 million. Our capital budget, for the first time in our agency's history, exceeds our operating budget at $227 million.
Wow.
So we've been fortunate because through the pandemic, our sales tax has performed well. Our grants revenue has performed well. We obviously received a great deal of assistance from our federal partner. We have a state government that is investing in transit. So, we've had the ability to establish some capital reserves and develop a bus rapid transit improvement program. So we have 2 operating BRT lines. We have 4 active BRT capital projects to expand that system. And while I'm at it, we're also in the midst of our zero emission feasibility study. And we've been able to establish a reserve to support our eventual updated fleet plan. So, we've been very fortunate to be able to partner with the federal government, with FTA and the CIG program. We do very well in the competitive area for RAISE grants, for, Tiger grants before that.
Right.
Through the competitive processes administered by our MPOs. Long story short, we're in a good position to be able to invest in our infrastructure as well as our service.
That's wonderful. And do you charge a fare for your service to ride regular bus? And what is that?
$250.
$250. That's that. Mm-hmm. Yep. And
now we offer a senior fare, a low income fare. We also just had a new state law enacted last year, creating a new grant program incentivizing transit agencies to let all kids ride for free under the age of 19. We have joined that community effort, and now all kids statewide are able to ride transit for free.
Do you find kids are riding to go to school on your service?
It's more after school.
Okay.
Weekends, kids going to jobs, going to events, going to social engagements. We've seen around a 50% increase in youth ridership since we started this last September. It's definitely had a positive effect.
Yeah. And once they start learning to rely on and reading schedules and all that as young people. Hopefully they'll take those patterns with them into their adulthood.
Because we have a state senator here from our county who chairs our Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Marco Elias. He'd be a great interview for you, by the way, but he's a true champion of transit, and it was his brainchild to do the free youth fares for everybody.
Yeah, that's great.
State transportation package last fall.
Let's talk a little bit more about funding before we go into future plans. Some transit agencies now in the spring of 2023 are worried about what they're calling a fiscal cliff. San Francisco has mentioned that, Muni, that when they get through this last bit of ARPA funds that they have, that because ridership has not come back and they were very dependent on fares from that ridership to fund them, that they're going to be in a world of hurt financially. But it doesn't sound like that's the case there. Am I wrong?
No. Well, I mean, obviously you want to be prudent. And,
right.
We want to plan, and we do plan for financial sustainability. My goal in expanding our capital program was to make sure that we could commit to delivering our service growth goals long term before we committed to additional capital investments. And we've been able to show that path to our board of directors. We were fortunate to be able to pass a ballot measure in 2015 that increased our sales tax from 9/10 to 12/10, essentially. And as I said, it's performed robustly. And we've been able to establish, generous capital and operating reserves. So we're not as sensitive to changes in fare revenue, although fare revenue is an important part of our operating revenue. This year we have a 6-month operating reserve, for example.
Oh, that's great, Rick. Congratulations. That's really good fiscal stewardship.
Yeah. Well, knock on wood, right? We're as dependent on the business cycle as everybody else, and the sales tax is a fickle partner. We've just been fortunate for the last few years to see it perform very well.
And what have you got planned for the near future? You mentioned you're going to be working on your BRT. What specifically are you doing there with your plans, and what other big plans do you have?
Well, the centerpiece of our planning right now is a major network restructure to integrate our system with Sound Transit's light rail system. Sound Transit is the regional transit authority that serves King, Pierce, and Snohomish County, the greater Seattle area. And as many folks know, they've got probably the most ambitious capital program in the country as far as rail. They're spending about $2.5 billion to bring light rail up into Snohomish County with a terminal at Linwood, which is one of our largest cities. So in the fall of 2024, next year, we'll be restructuring our whole network to pull our service out of downtown and redeploy it within the county to provide more coverage and more frequency and connections to 3 of those 4 new light rail stations. So that's a really ambitious undertaking that is going to affect all of our passengers. And we're very excited about that. We put about 30% of our service hours into King County and downtown Seattle. And we're going to pull that service back into the county, let Sound Transit take over that load and be able to provide a higher frequency, more comprehensive coverage network here within the county. So that's thing one. And at the heart of that network, Paul, is our bus rapid transit program. Okay. I mentioned we have the 2 operating lines today, the green line and the blue line. We also have a CIG funded 3rd line under construction today, and that's the orange line.
Will that be dedicated lanes and all that?
It's business access transit lanes. So it's curbside bus lanes with, access right in, right out for businesses and employers. So it's pretty good. Pretty reliable. We had the FTA administrator, Nuria Fernandez, out for a groundbreaking last spring. And we're hoping to have her come back out again next March when we open that line.
She's great, really getting out. I mean, she's seems like every other week she's out at another ribbon cutting or something. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, she's just such a great champion for the industry and for the federal partnership. And but
having run a transit system, she's one of us. And so she gets it. Yeah,
exactly. We also have a 4th line under development in planning that we expect to take into project development next year. That's the gold line, and that goes up into our North County area. And then we've got 2 extensions in development, an extension of the blue line. That'll take us down to one of the light rail stations. And then our green line, we're extending down into Bothell to connect with Sound Transit's bus rapid transit network in East King County.
Okay.
So 4 active BRT projects right now.
Wow.
And then also active facilities program. We're expanding our operating base. We're adding 6 new double bays and 14 new lifts to handle the fleet expansion. And we're headed down the path of, cracking the code on zero emission.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep hydrogen in mind. That's my advice.
We're looking at it very closely, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
We started the interview by talking about our service territory, and we've got some very long routes. I need a vehicle that can do 350, 400 miles.
Right. Without a charge.
A day. And that's pointing toward hydrogen in a pretty significant way. So we're going to look very closely at it. And it may be that we end up with a blended approach.
Yes. A lot of people are looking at that. Yeah. All of the above approach. I've got a bunch of shows coming up on hydrogen. It just, to me, makes sense to consider that as well with the electric grid and all the other things going on that we, like one CEO told me, and I didn't come up with this. These were other CEOs telling me this, that made me start thinking about it, was that, this is one on the East Coast who told me, Paul, if Hurricane Sandy came up, when it came up and ripped up everything on the coast, if we'd have been all electric buses, we'd have been plumb out of luck in our role to get people out of the city, right? To evacuate. So back then, of course, they were diesel and they were able to get diesel fuel and all that. But going forward, if we move away from fossil fuels, I think a lot of CEOs are telling me on the coast, especially, that we need to look at look at Lauren Skyver down in California, in Southern California with her hydrogen plant down there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think a blended approach is what a lot of CEOs and people that are thinking about us, and also the supply chain issues and all the other stuff going on with being able to get enough zero emission buses of one type to meet the political mandates, saying by a year certain, you have to be, X amount this way. So people are scrambling. I've talked to a lot of people about it lately, Rick. So I think that's smart. You're looking at that.
Yeah. And we're a little uniquely positioned here in the Northwest. We are blessed with abundant hydroelectric power. We have a clean energy source, and there's a lot of active discussion underway right now within the transit industry here about forming a hydrogen cooperative.
Interesting.
To generate and produce and share that resource.
If you get that going, let me know, because I'd love to, get everybody on a show together and do that either in person or, because I think that's important. Our friend in California, Doran Barnes, Doran is big in hydrogen as well.
Yeah, there's some great learning out there, and we're remiss if we don't take advantage of what our peers are experiencing as they experiment in this space. But it looks really promising to me.
That does sound good. It's funny, all this great capital and even operating dollars, it seems like you've gotten through the federal government to do some interesting things. A lot of that probably comes from your background of actually understanding really how all these programs work from the Hill, right? Didn't you start your career there on the Hill?
I did. I started my career in the House of Representatives in the late 80s and had the opportunity to work at the Committee on Energy and Commerce under John Dingell. And at the time, Representative Al Swift from out here, who represented the 2nd Congressional District, which interestingly is the congressional district currently occupied by Rick Larson. So I've come all the way back around.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Because he's our congressman here in Everitt.
And explain to everybody else his role now.
Right. He's the ranking Democrat on the House T&I committee, and he had a major role to play in the development of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And now he's obviously very focused on overseeing implementation of those policies. So he's just been such a tremendous partner for us here, but also transit nationally.
Yes.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that he himself is a bus rider and a transit user. So
that's great.
Yeah. Anyway, so I started way back when on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and that committee had jurisdiction over rail. So I got involved in Amtrak capital and operating expansion, Northeast Corridor. We authored the first high-speed rail authorization act, and then went on to work in the Senate for 6 years for Senator Murray. had an opportunity to support her in her first term in the 90s. And then I made my way back home here into the Northwest with my wife. We had our first child, and I landed at Sound Transit, the aforementioned Sound Transit, where I spent 17 years working to plan expansion of their system.
Yeah, you're on the other end, the receiving end of it as they came up, right? Oh, that's interesting,
So,
Rick.
yeah, now I'm up north and working with them to complete the regional vision up here in the north part of our metropolitan area.
Well, you guys have a real gem in Julie Tim. You know, she was my neighbor here in the East, working in Richmond for quite a while, and is a great friend of our program, has done a lot of podcasts and TV show and live events with us. And she has got a great vision. She told me about that light rail line coming up into your community. So it's really interesting to hear from your perspective. I'm very excited for the work that's happening there in the Pacific Northwest. That's why we're doing 2 back-to-back shows. So your show will be on, and then 2 weeks later, Tom Hingston's will be on from Everitt. And I think it's a great, you got a great, and I didn't even know your congressman was the ranking Democrat on the House T&I committee. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And Senator Murray on the Senate side is chairing the Appropriations Committee, and Senator Cantwell is chairing the Commerce Committee. So we're really well positioned to partner with the federal government and innovate and try some new things and really be the test bed for some of these new policies.
That's wonderful, Rick. Well, hopefully sometime in the next year or two, I can get out there and see it with my own eyes and meet you there and tour some of the operations there. It sounds like a wonderful place.
Yeah, we'd love to have you out and give you a ride.
Thank you. Yeah, I was out there for the APTA conference, of course, and but was all tied up with what was going on there. Didn't get out too much, but you've got some wonderful people there.
Yeah, I'll be visiting with Michelle and Julie tomorrow, in fact.
Oh, well, tell them I said hi.
I will do that. It's a great group, as you mentioned. We meet monthly as a group just to compare notes and coordinate our efforts and make sure our staffs are collaborating. And it's, we're very fortunate to be here and have this community of common interests.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, Rick, thank you so much for being our guest today. I think you are sitting on prime real estate for exciting things happening in public transportation over the next 5 years. Maybe some of the best news I've heard in the last year or so, talking with CEOs. You've got a very positive environment with the funding you need, both from the feds and locals. It shows you the value of having a dedicated sales tax where you don't have to go and kind of hat in hand every year to the legislature and like a lot of transit agencies do. So you're set prime for success. And with a leader like you in place who understands, what's happening on the Hill as well as locally, the people there in Snohomish County are well served. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for reaching out. And like I said, let us know when you're going to be out here and we'll give you a tour.
Awesome.
Hi, this is Mike Bismeyer, Transit and Kindness Advocate, and this is Mike's Minute, where we talk about mentorship, leadership, and kindness with the hopes it'll inspire you to pay it forward. Wow, there's a lot to talk about after the most recent Transit Unplugged live from the Think Transit conference in Nashville, with our industry leaders leading once again. The leadership tidbits that were covered by the inspiring leaders directly align with mentorship, leadership, and kindness. A few of the inspiring comments that I heard were particular to the workforce deficit and recruiting discussions that continue to go on in our industry, and are very relevant to the work that I'm doing with the young emerging leaders within CUTA in Canada. Staffing, supply chain funding, but somehow getting in front of the youth and the next generation of our workers. I think the issue of identifying talent and amplifying the message that there are many jobs beyond just operators and schedules in transit is something that was hit on by all the leaders at Think Transit. There are skill sets we need at every level. Leaders like to discuss these. There's multiple things that are on the hot plate: diversity, low emission, rider behavior, politics, mentoring, board relationships, all those skill sets. We need to get our young leaders to understand we need them. How much do we need them? They are the future. Let's get them on board. Transit is kind by nature. I think it's another direct parlay. And the mentorship of these leaders that come to the Think Transit conference and all the Unplugged podcasts and share this information is truly inspiring and continues to help us with the recruiting efforts. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Kindness is cool.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged in depth with our special guest, Rick Ilgenfritz, CEO of Community Transit in Snohomish County, Washington. Now, next week on Transit Unplugged News and Views, we're continuing our discussion of hydrogen-powered vehicles with Doran Barnes, CEO of Foothill Transit, and Carl Gannat, Managing Director of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District. We also hear from Jim Herring, CIO of MV Transportation, with his recommendations on some business and leadership books you should really check out. Now make sure you visit transitunplugged.com so you sign up for the newsletter. You're always in the loop with whatever's going on with the show. But if you have a question, comment, or want to be a guest on the show, feel free to email us at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next week, ride safe, ride happy.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Transit Unplugged, the podcast. How would you like to see behind-the-scenes footage of the agencies that Paul visits? Then be sure to check out the new Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube, where transit evangelist Paul Comfort dives into the culture, the food, and the transit of major cities around the world. You'll see the operations control centers, how maintenance shops work, and the latest innovations taking place at agencies around the globe as we work together to improve the lives of our transit riders and our communities. Be sure to subscribe to Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube or at transitunplugged.com.